not only do we not need the old system puts us in the flesh and makes us try to perform. And the flesh is not saved, by the way. I don't know if you know that or not, but the flesh is not. The flesh is contrary to the spirit. But your new spirit has a new nature in it, and we're supposed to walk in the spirit, Paul says, and we shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. We are not carnal people trying to be spiritual. We are spiritual people who walk in the spirit, and then we don't observe the flesh. But anyway, this is new. First thing is new is the mediator. Then a new nature on the inside. And then in verse 11 it says, they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. Now what this says to me is that this relationship, this new covenant that we have through Jesus, it's not a one-size-fits-all where we're just cookie-cutter, stamped out of a mold. God knows us and has a relationship with us each as individuals. And He has a plan for our lives each as individuals. And we don't have to do what everybody else does, and we walk with the Lord according to the Spirit that He's put inside of us. And what other people do is none of our concern, really. I mean, we're concerned with them as people, but we don't, it reminds me of that place in John's Gospel where Jesus was raised from the dead, and they saw Him on the shore fishing, and He says, come and dine, and they sailed over to the shore, and He had these fish for them, and then He says to Peter, do you love me? And then Peter says, yes, I love you. And He says, well, feed my sheep. And then He says a second time, Peter, do you love me? He says, yes. And He says, well, feed my sheep. And then a third time, it says, Peter, do you love me? And it says Peter was grieved because He asked Him 3 times in a row. It's like, hey, isn't it good enough? But see, what most people say is that, well, He denied Him 3 times, so He gave Him 3 times to say, yes, to reconfirm that He loved him. He said, feed my lambs. And then He was so generous and so kind to Peter, He gave him a little word, a little prophecy about how Peter would reach the end of his life, how he would die. And He gave him that little prophecy. And Peter obviously understood what it was all about. And it was as though there's this little competition going between Peter and John. And so when Jesus gives Peter this little prophecy about how he's going to die, Peter thinks to himself, well, give John one of those too. But he says, what shall this man do? That's what he's saying. Give him one of them too. Thank you a lot. You appreciate that, but how about him? He's getting a little tired of the heat being on him all the time. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? And here's how you're going to die. And, well, let's go on to John now. Let's move on. That's sort of what he's saying. And Jesus says something very interesting and remarkable. And He said, if I will that He abide till I come, what's that to you? Follow thou me. What He's saying is, don't worry about my relationship with John. Don't worry about my dealings with him. All you got to do is follow me. See, that makes things so much more simple for us. But we do. We're prone to getting distracted, aren't we? Especially, here's something that distracts us. If we're looking for some need in our life and we're looking to God for that, we have a heightened awareness of anybody else who seems to be getting the blessing that we want. It makes us really fussy sometimes. And I don't know, should I tell you? I guess once I start, I have to tell you, because then you're wondering what I'm going to say. But I don't think April would mind me telling you this, but she's not here today, so she won't ever find out. Unless she watches YouTube. But she's told it before in public. I don't think she would mind. But there's Elizabeth looking at us through the glass window back there. But, for many years, April, we've got 4 boys that we love very much, and we're happy with all of them, and every one of them is special. But April really wanted a girl. That was really the number one desire of her heart, is to have a girl. And it just seemed like we were just making boys. And we love all of them, and every one of them is special, and we appreciate all of them. But she really wanted a girl. And for years, that was a matter of prayer for her, and a matter of coming to the Lord and praying about it. And I know, because I had to live through it, she had a heightened awareness of anybody else who ever got pregnant and had a girl. And especially when it was people that were not even married, or people who were not living a life that she would think is, a Christian life, or not even Christians. And we'd have this guy, why did she get a girl? And she's not even married. And she's not even in a, related. Who is the father? It was just aggravating to her. And I kept having she got sick of hearing it. I kept having to tell her that story about Peter and John. What's that to you? Just follow the Lord. Don't worry about that. It's like it might as well be in some other universe. It doesn't affect your life, you see. And the same thing is true with all of us. What goes on in other people's lives has no relationship or bearing on our relationship with the Lord. He says here, did I read that right? All shall know me. You don't have to tell everybody you need to know the Lord. He says, I'm going to get to know each and every one of you. Now, this is not when he says, know the Lord, that all shall know me from the least to the greatest. This is not an instruction for us to get to know him. This is him saying, I'm going to get to know you. This is him saying, I'm going to enter into a relationship with you as an individual. And he already knows everything about us. But he says, I'm going to deal with you and walk with you and work with you with the individual idiosyncrasies of your life and the personal things that are specific to you. He's promising here to know us and to lead us and to guide us and to love us and to help us each as individuals, knowing all the individual things that we deal with. And he meets us where we are. He doesn't make us come up to where he is. He comes down to where we are and meets us as individuals with all of our limitations and all of our flaws and all of our little quirks and all the things that we think sometimes make us inferior, which are not really true in the eyes of God. But he says, I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to know you each as individuals, from the least to the greatest. And if you've ever felt like the least, that's okay. And I hope you're not sitting there feeling like you're the greatest. Because, that's not good either. But from the least to the greatest. So that means everybody. It's all inclusive. That's new as well. He's not making a relationship or a covenant with a big mass, a group. You're not just a number. You're not just a face in the crowd. You're an individual with him. Verse 12. For. Now the word for there, I like to sometimes stop and ponder the grammar. The word for is a word in this context that means because. The word for there functions like he could have said, you could understand it by saying because. For means this is why, or here's the reason why. Here is the reason why I will come and know you as an individual. Why? Because I will be merciful to their unrighteousness and their sins and iniquities. What about them? Notice what it says. I will remember them no more. In other words, I will not be cognizant. I won't be thinking about them. I won't remember them anymore. Now this is opposite of what most people think God's main job is. I think most people have this mental image of God with a long white beard and a big robe and a feather quill pin looking around over the earth saying, aha, I caught you. I'm going to write that down. Because sometimes people say, well, God's going to get you for that. You're not going to get by with that. And we threaten people like that sometimes. Like God's, I saw that, you thought you got by with it, but I'm going to write that down. This says the opposite. He says there's sins and iniquities. Not I'm going to write them down and get them for it. See, we got to come face to face with the fact that he already got us for it in the person of Jesus. If you want to say it that way. That's kind of a crude way to say it. Those sins and iniquities have already been judged in the body of Jesus. They've already been punished. They've already been paid for. And so successful and so adequate was the job that Jesus did on the cross that God can now say, for us who put our faith in him as our mediator, your sins and iniquities, I'm not going to remember them anymore. Because the one you're trusting in, the one you're believing in, has already eliminated them and taken them away. So, the reason he can know us and have engage in our lives as individuals, it's not because we're so great. It's not because we're so holy in and of ourselves. I don't mind telling you this, there's only one who's holy, and that's Jesus. There's only one who's righteous, and that's Jesus. And our righteousness is of him, and our holiness is his. And everything we have in relation to God, it's really his. And we stand in relation to God on the basis of him and what he's done. So he says, I will be merciful to their unrighteousness. And their sins and iniquities I will remember no more. I think it's interesting that he makes this distinction between sins and iniquities, which you could say those are transgressions, or those are doing things that are wrong. But also, what's the difference, you might say, between when he says, I will be merciful to their unrighteousness? Well, if you think about righteousness, what it means is accordance with a standard, being in line with what's the standard of what is right. And let's just be honest, I don't know if, you know, I hope this doesn't upset you if I'm, you know, brutally frank.